Today we're going to be looking at the Beat, the new small-size daily stroller from Stokke. The Beat is meant to replace the now discontinued Scoot and is in many ways quite clearly a rework of the same design. We'll be putting out a comparison of these two models within the next few days in order to point out the differences, but for now we're going to have a look at the Beat as its own animal. Let's kick off with some stats. The Beat clocks in at 9.5 kilos and measures 78 by 53 by 32 centimeters when folded down. It takes up to 22 kilos in the seat and 10 kilos in the underslung shopping basket. Note while we're talking about weight that if you read the fine print in your instruction manual, it says that the max weight for accessories is 2 kilos. Not all manufacturers include this information, but they should. I gotta say though, I find it a bit strange that they then go on to list the sibling board as an acceptable accessory on their website, since it will come to weigh far more than 2 kilos when you add the sibling. With an eye towards protecting the longevity and mechanical integrity of this stroller, I would definitely recommend steering clear of the wheeled board, as well as respecting the idea of a 2 kilo maximum for accessories. Okay, before getting into mechanics, let's have a look at a few factors impacting comfort and functionality, starting with the seat. Size-wise, the seat is decently average for small-sized daily strollers, with the length of the footrest being really the most limiting factor. But the Beat should fit your child up until that 3.5, 4-year point, when you'll probably be done with strollers anyway. The Beat sports a full recline, though American viewers should check this before buying, as we've heard that several manufacturers have had to reduce the recline of their models when selling in the US due to safety regulations. The quality of the textiles is decent. The Beat uses eco-friendly fabrics, which matters to a lot of people, and the canopy gives excellent coverage, maybe even the best on the market when the seat is in full recline. The textiles are not too hard to remove for a wash, more or less the same as on other stock models. As far as your own comfort is concerned, the Beat is easy enough to fold, and it folds with the seat attached, which is nice, but to be honest is something I've actually come to expect out of strollers of this size these days. The shopping basket is nice as well. It's large, has a good weight capacity, and importantly, is always decently accessible from the side opposite the facing of the seat. Driving-wise, there are pluses and minuses with the Beat. We'll get into the mechanics of this in a moment, but as far as how you will experience the Beat's drivability goes, the Beat is going to be very comfortable to drive on smooth terrain with good sized wheels and some degree of wobble protection in the front wheel swivel mechanisms. But the complete lack of suspension combined with its rigid chassis, which is on its own a good thing, means that the Beat is likely to jump and jitter pretty hard as soon as you hit even relatively light, uneven terrain. Okay, let's move on to the mechanics of the Beat then, starting with the seat unit. So I wanted to make a special note about the seat unit itself, and if you watch our video where we remove the textiles, you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. But they've obviously done a lot with this model to reduce weight as much as possible, and one place in which they've gone too far, in my opinion, is the seat unit. If you look at the rest of the stroller, it does look thin, but it does look solid for the most part in relation to the metal and the plastic elements. But when you remove the textiles, the seat unit is made of incredibly thin plastic pieces, and there really is not enough support along the seat unit for it to be kind of its own unit. In order to maintain structural integrity, it really needs to be locked onto the stroller, and it has to have the bumper bar and have to have the textiles in order to kind of keep the shape as it is. And of course, that's not a big deal. You're going to, for the most part, keep your seat on your stroller. But I would say that there's a high chance there's going to be problems in the future, problems with braking in particular, because of the thinness of the plastic and the weakness of the connection points. The area of this that disturbs me the most is the footrest mechanism. It is just way too much plastic in these joints, and those are points that are going to take a certain amount of weight, both from the kid's legs and when your kid starts kicking around because he wants something, he or she wants something, and so on. I do see that as a potential problem area, as well as simply how it activates up and down. I find it fiddly right out of the box, to be honest. Mechanically speaking, when we're looking at the handle, they've gone for a bit of a thinner construction than they normally do on their other strollers. It's another area of the chassis that I think might potentially have some problems in the future, in particular because they've gone for a very thin height adjustment mechanism on the handle here, and there's no crossbar, which of course you generally wouldn't need provided there's enough structural integrity. But because of the thin height adjustment mechanism and just the overall shape of the bars and the circumference of the handle here under the leather, I do see this as an area that can be bent to the side, come out of alignment. If you have like a little bit too much weight, you're driving over a little bit too rough terrain, or of course simply as a result of accidents while you're loading or unloading the stroller. So it's on its own, it's not really a problem. It feels sturdy enough, but it is one of those areas where they've kind of pushed up to the limit as far as how much weight a structure should take in relation to how thin it is. Okay, having a look at the central locking mechanism, it's actually quite a good central locking mechanism. It's an updated version of what they did with the Scoot, and inside it works via some sliding discs that are made of metal, slide against each other. There's really no plastic components in there that are responsible for taking a whole lot of weight. It is a very solidly constructed system, and I expect it actually to have fewer problems than the preceding Scoot model. All of the plastic cover elements are a little bit tight together, both on the central locking mechanism as well as up here. So if you do wind up buying the Beat, then I would recommend getting a can of silicone spray, as there can be some creaking and squeaking issues. We noticed that really right out of the box, if you listen. But that sound will more or less go away just with a little bit of silicone spray sprayed into the mechanisms. Okay, we're going to have a look at the lower rear frame of the Beat then. Most notably really the brake system and the ways the wheels attach to the chassis themselves, because there is no longer any sort of suspension on the rear end. I find that to be really the biggest letdown with this as a replacement model for the Scoot, but it is what it is. There's no suspension, and that of course impacts where you can drive the stroller. Looking at the brake system then, they've switched over to this sort of flip-flop friendly pedal in the middle, the same kind that the Cybex Pream has. As far as how that system works, as far as the brake mechanisms inside the central bar, it's a very simple sort of a system, and I doubt that you're going to wind up having problems in there, simply because of the simplicity with which it's designed. But I do see a couple potential problems with the brake system when it comes to the extremities, where it locks into the wheel themselves. So I'm going to remove this rear wheel, show you a couple things. So firstly, the pin pokes out quite far. It's also quite thin. For me, this means there's a potential for bending problems. In addition, there's like a plastic ridge here, right at the edge where it pops out, that could of course weaken or break. But as far as the pin itself, there is a problem with bending, and if you wind up bending that pin, you're going to have trouble with it retracting back into the brake system. You can also have trouble with it locking into the grooves on the inside of the rear wheel. Exacerbating this problem is the fact that, so now you have an axle that pokes out from the chassis and it locks into the wheel here. There's no sort of a locking washer on the back side of this ball bearing. What this essentially means is that the ball bearings, like the condition of them, is going to be what is more or less solely responsible for keeping the wheel rotating flush against the stroller as it should, not having any sort of looseness on the vertical axis. And if that ball bearing, when that ball bearing starts to go a little bit and you start having a bit of looseness on that vertical axis, that's another point at which the metal pin of the brake system can kind of fall out of position in relation to those little notches. So there is a chance you're going to wind up with trouble down the road if you use this stroller a bit harder than you, I suppose, should, or on a little bit rougher terrain, with either the brakes not locking or with trouble with the brakes retracting in the case of the pin. Okay, we're going to have a little bit of a closer look at the front frame then. First thing I would point out is that there is no suspension in the front frame. Very often with swivel wheel models, you wind up having suspension built into the fork. It is not in this case. As far as the swivel lock mechanism goes, it's like a plastic pin that pokes down into a trough on the inside of the fork. That's a very common setup. Both elements are plastic. From the outset, it's not going to probably have a lot of problems, but it is a little bit of a weak sort of a swivel lock system. So if you're the type of person who tends to use the swivel lock and use your wheels locked very often, there's a chance for wear and breakage down the road. They have gone to great lengths to create sort of a wobble protection system. First and foremost being a spring-loaded pad here, which is quite nice, although I do wish they used a slightly thicker spring, gave it a little bit more push against the fork. The other 2 points are the fact that they have a locking point high up on the axle, as well as this sort of raised lip at the lower point of the axle. And what this does is gives the axle 2 points at which it's being held sort of in place so that it can't put too much pressure as it moves horizontally against the inside of the housing mechanism and wear down the inside of that housing mechanism, thus leading to sort of wobbly issues down the road. That being said, even though they've done so much work in order to kind of protect the longevity of the front fork and front housing system, I feel that the overall setup is still a little bit loose from the outset. And so having put simply a stronger spring in that suspension pad, as well as making this locking point maybe a little bit tighter, lowering down the locking point there so that it locks very tightly under there as it pushes up, would have helped a bit with what it seems to me they were trying to achieve, which is to prevent wobble issues down the road. And because it is a bit looser, I can't really say that even with all the work that they've obviously done design-wise, that it won't develop wobble problems down the road. Hopefully it won't, but there is a chance simply because it is a bit looser, I would say, than it ought to be with all those protections. So I just wanted to make a little note on the wheels themselves. They have gone for a little bit larger than average front wheels, which is kind of nice because it helps you to get up and over things a bit easier than when you have smaller wheels. The fact that it has no suspension is going to limit what that's really going to do for you, as you can't really go over that rough terrain anyway. But it is nice that they have made a little bit larger front wheels. Back wheels are kind of a standard size, I would say, for like a small size daily stroller. Another thing about the wheels themselves is that if you look at this as a reboot of the Scoot, they did go over from a foam-filled tire to purely a foam tire. I personally find that the foam-filled tire is a better product, as it adds a little bit of suspension while this doesn't. And in addition, the foam over a few years, even though it's a hard foam, does tend to get a little bit damaged in the sense that sharper pebbles and stuff can embed themselves in the foam and it winds up looking a little bit worse. It does seem to be a high quality foam. I just personally prefer the foam-filled tires. So, should you consider getting the Beat? Unless you're a die-hard fan of Stokke and feel the Trails, a vastly superior stroller mechanically, is just way too large for you, then I would unfortunately say probably not. Not this iteration and not at this price point. I say unfortunately because I'm actually a fan of Stokke as a company. They are very methodical about improving their designs over time, and they are great when it comes to customer support and honoring their guarantee. To be honest, though I stand by the evaluations I made in the mechanics section, it's possible that I might be judging the Beat a little harder than I might other models, simply because I've come to expect only the best from Stokke, much as I tend to do with Bugaboo. The Beat has faults, and as a replacement for the Scoot, is not a clear improvement in all respects. Some things have gotten better, some worse. But in the end, my chief problem with the Beat is really actually the same problem that I had with the Scoot. I don't quite know where to place its use value in relation to the market. I mean, one would like to think of the Beat as a small, light stroller meant for urban living. And to be honest, if you live in a very flat, smooth environment and your lifestyle is such that you won't be overly stressing the stroller, then maybe it will work just fine for you. But when you really look at the numbers, it's really not quite small, nor light, nor cheap enough to compete with other small-size daily models. Heck, when you look at the numbers, it's really actually more or less the same size, weight, and price when you consider the extra cost of a bassinet and rain cover as a lot of high-end mid-size models, which will outperform it mechanically, especially when it comes to drivability. In any case, we hope you found this review interesting, and if you did, we ask that you subscribe, as it helps us to continue making videos in the future.